now, and the old may have died, but none of us have forgotten. And we'll make sure that for as long as the occupation and the injustice continues. With that being said, my name is Hadid Bashir, and I'm a third-generation Nakba survivor. Okay, thank you guys. I hope that didn't take too long. Our next speaker is Nancy Sharkawi.
Nancy, woo! Good job. That's awesome.
So in 1946, the Palestinian people were systematically expelled from their homes. Their villages were laid to ruin, and many innocent civilians were killed in the process. By 1948, 25% of the Palestinian population, or 175,000 people, were forced to leave their homes and assume a position of international refugees. While the state of Israel declared their land and declared their independence as a state with stolen land. Well, these are the facts. And whether you like it or not, this systematic ethnic cleansing still occurs till this day. In fact, it's even being funded by the U.S. Billions of tax dollars go to Israel every year to fund the military, to help expel people, to destroy their homes, to kill people. And we fund it. We fund the building of these settlements. As a human being, I cannot approve of this. I can't. As an Egyptian, not only do I know what this pain is like, but we've been through this with the Palestinian people. On both sides of my family, every son is required to be drafted into the military. In 1967, most of my great uncles were fighting that war. Last time I was in Egypt, my great uncle, Uncle Khalid, he told me stories. He was part of the Marine Special Forces, and he would tell me how he would find villages of Palestinian people just completely dead on the floor, with no time to bury them. He would tell me stories of how he would find his comrades on the floor, already ran over by tanks. Another uncle of mine who somehow, by some miracle, survived. His platoon was attacked by white phosphorus falling from the sky. And the only way he survived was that someone found him and brought him back to the Egyptian border. He was completely burned. His arm was burned almost to the bone. And he was found in the desert lying there. So when you say that these people have died during the process, when you say that these Palestinian people are being forced out of their homes, the Egyptian people understand and know what that pain is like. Because they have lost fathers, they have lost brothers, they have lost uncles in that war. And they know that pain. Not only that, every day we live side by side with Palestinian refugees. We see them living with us, but the government will not give them citizenship. They're not allowed to vote, they're not allowed to hold property in their own name. And the most we can do is help them by giving them some kind of money or some kind of aid when we can. If that is even possible. But that's if you're lucky in the economy that Egypt has. These people, the Palestinian refugees, they live in a vacuum of space where they cannot be active. All they do is survive with a hope of just wanting to go back home. Something that we all take for granted. We just get our keys, go in our car, and we drive home. But this is a luxury that Palestinian people cannot have. They can't afford it. Otherwise, they'll be killed or worse, tortured in jail. And for what? I implore everyone here, regardless of your background, regardless of your race, to stand up for justice. Because that is what the Palestinian people need. And it is not right for us to live in a world where we allow such injustice to happen and say nothing.
Yay!
Thank you, Nancy. Our next speaker is Amal Ali.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Amal Ali, and I'm a Palestinian American. But as a little girl, I grew up believing another truth. For most of my childhood, I thought I was Jordanian American. That's where my grandparents live, and where I go to visit them, and that's where my parents were raised in the later part of their childhood. My cousins have one accent, but my grandparents speak a different Arabic. That's because in the Six-Day War of 1967, my grandparents were forced out of their native villages in Palestine into refugee camps in Jordan. My parents spent years trying to explain to me what it means to be Palestinian, but this went over my head. Palestine was never more than a mythological land to me. I never found it on globes at school, and fifth grade textbooks only tell you so much about the world. Eventually, once I conquered the challenge of internet access, I discovered that everything they told me was true. There was this rich, beautiful place on the other side of the world where my mom and my dad had grown up. While searching online, I discovered the history of Palestine and why my grandparents no longer reside in the lands of their forefathers that they cultivated for decades, if not centuries. In the aftermath of the Six-Day War of 1967, known as Nakba, they and the rest of my family became part of the 4 million Palestinian refugees forced out of the Israeli occupation of Palestine that began with the establishment of the Jewish state on this day in 1948. That year, half of the land in my dad's hometown in the Hebron district, including 20 acres of my great-grandfather's farm, was confiscated by the Haganah, a Zionist terrorist gang, and converted into an exclusively Jewish town, now known by the name of Alil. The numbers I read were horrifying, but none of them compared to the photos I saw of Palestinians leaving their homes with their belongings in their arms. They resembled the pictures of Native Americans on the Trail of Tears that so many of us learned about back in elementary school. The look of emptiness and betrayal in their eyes was indescribable, and it was then that I vowed to dedicate my energy to learning about Palestine and fighting for freedom and justice of its people, my family included. I made one of the pivotal steps of this goal in 2008 when I set foot in Palestine for the first time. Entering was definitely not easy, even as an American citizen with so-called VIP access. I spent 5 hours waiting on the border between Jordan and Palestine, waiting for them to grant me an entry visa. What slowed the process was the answers I provided to their questions. My mother was born in Jerusalem, and the uncle escorting me held a Palestinian Hawiyya identification. Once my visa was finally granted, we set out for my mom's hometown of Beit Surik, a small town of 2,000 people, 7 miles east of Jerusalem. 7 miles isn't far, but after taking a taxi from the Dead Sea border to Jerusalem, it took an additional 2 hours to reach Beit Surik, due to the numerous checkpoints in place. We were stopped by checkpoint officers 4 times to present our passports and prove to them that we had permission to enter my mother's hometown. Our driver told us that this wasn't out of the ordinary. He keeps newspapers in his taxi for the sometimes hour-long stops at checkpoints. That week that I spent in Beit Surik once we reached it was easily one of the best of my life. I tasted air fresher than any I could have imagined. I roamed the landmarks of my mom's childhood and counted stars in the night sky until I lost track and fell asleep. Such a quiet, peaceful place. But each small adventure was marked by the constant reminder of the occupation next door. The separation wall, which we model over here, claimed 30 acres of my late great-grandfather's land when it was erected in 2006, months before his death. The exclusively Jewish settlement on the hill overlooking Beit Surik was complete with a watchtower. The home that we stayed in was that of my great-grandparents, where my mother was raised by her grandmother. She was raised by her grandmother for the first 7 years of her life because her parents were kicked out and couldn't take their children with them. The gunshots we heard one afternoon foretold the death of a boy in the next town. He talked back to an IDF soldier. I have since returned to Palestine 2 more times and don't intend for it to be the last. I hope not only to see my family's hometowns, but all of that beautiful land, from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea to the Red Sea to the Golan Heights, and everything in between. My grandparents can't be granted permission to enter, so they were formally expelled and rely on me and the fact that I'm an American citizen to tell them of their ancestral lands. In doing so, I not only keep their memories alive, but their hope as well, that this struggle has not died. Former Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion said at the time of the Nakba, as Hadil said, that the old will die and the young will forget. We are the proof. We're here today fighting for this struggle. Palestine is my blood, the air I breathe, the thoughts I think, the notes I sing, the words I write, and the tears I cry. With the fire of passion and dedication alight, we will never forget. My name is Amal Ali, and I'm a third-generation Nakba survivor.
Woo!
Thank you, Aman. Our next and final speaker is Ghassan Hussein.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know some of you have class right now, but I would appreciate if you didn't go. This is the only time I'll ask you not to go to class. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ghassan Hussein, and I was born in the hospital of Ramallah City in Palestine in 1989. At the age of 2, my family and I settled here in California and have been living here for the past 21 years, except for the 4 years between 2004 and 2008 when my family and I moved back to Palestine, which is where I went to high school. After high school, I came back to the States to begin college, and here I am today. Palestine has many stories to be told. Its denied roots and its renewed routes shape the history of so many Palestinians, as you just heard. They are very far from home, but they will be forever close to it. The following is an oral history of a young Ghassan Hussein, a Palestinian-born citizen who came to the United States with his family, escaping fear, looking for a life their own beloved country, occupied militarily by Israel, could not be granted anymore. This is a history of an immigrant family who had left their land with love for their land, looking for a new land. If any of you would like to move from the sun into the shade, that's what I'm about to do.
Louder.
Louder?
A little
All right.
Just a little bit.
You guys are good over there? All right, vitamin D is good. The reason I'm telling this story in third person is because this is not just my story. This is a story any Palestinian will relate to and share. The title is Palestinian Diaspora and the Search for a Land to Call Home. Ghassan was born in the land of Palestine on March 6, 1989. He cannot remember the color of the sky, the smell of the olives, the calm of the neighborhood of those days of unexpected joy in the land of expected death. Once he opened his eyes in his already devastated home country, within which his family had decided to live and then to leave, his own land was about to be torn by a new cycle of violence, by a new war. The first intifada, the uprising, was about to spread throughout Palestine, a war fought by means of stones against the strength of cannons. The West Bank, the Palestinian territory where he lived under military occupation, was not yet a highly risked region in that period of time, but eventually it would become so in no more than a couple of years. Because we were from the West Bank, he says, we were safe, kind of safe. And so my family was not forced to leave as other Palestinian families were, but my parents did choose to leave for the safety. Although we were not forced to leave by gun, my parents thought that there would be better opportunities, better safety anywhere in a different country other than Palestine. As Palestinians, they were some of the lucky few who had been granted a Palestinian citizenship. Because I am from the West Bank, he says, I have the Palestinian citizenship. Of course, it is issued by Israel. Nothing given to Palestinians is not issued or not looked over by Israel first. Everything is dictated by it. The Palestinian citizenship allowed them to move and to cross boundaries to escape the folly of the Israeli occupation. They lived there for a while, until moving to Jordan, before coming to the United States. We felt safe there in Jordan, and we were very accepted because it is a neighboring Arab country. There were Arabs and Muslims, people like us that we could relate to. We felt comfortable there. But then my mother was granted a visa to the United States, which then allowed us to live in this country. Ghassan has lived his childhood in America, far from Israeli bombs and grenades, safe in a country that was willing to accept him, his Palestinian eyes and name, his Palestinian dress and sorrow, his Palestinian word.